Okay, so today we're going to be talking about objections, not objectives, objections. And so when we consider and we think about objection handling as it pertains to real estate, we really need to understand objection handling in general. We can't just go into this as a only ever looking at the one thing, which is like, well, for me, I just want to learn all the objection handling that has to do with real estate. And then if I learn that, I'm great. The reality is that not everything will come at us in the same format that we're scripted. Okay, scripts are great and they're good for us to learn and understand the language of business. Yet once we start getting hit with rapid fire, we need to understand what objections are and what they mean to the consumer, so that we understand how our handling of it can best match the outcome that we desire. So we're going to be talking about objections in general. And then we're going to dig into a couple of the main kind of causes just normal objections that come as a real estate agent. So we're going to do a big full circle here, but we're going to start with understanding what I go through every single time, and that's this. Our programming leads to our thinking, leads to our feelings lead to our actions lead to our results, which reaffirm and go back to our programming. Right now, everything that I want to make sure that we're conveying in the sales sense is that we are all sales professionals. A lot of us have a tendency to group sales into a space of that used car salesman or that dirty, slick, salesy kind of guy. And yet, when we think about sales, sales is an advocacy moment. Sales is our ability to really help people get to where they need to go by reframing their thoughts to move forward, okay? And so if we really think about that in the sales sense, if we're sales professionals, we are truly a different breed of advocates for those who are around us, those who are our consumers. And so we've got to reframe our programming, because when we think about sales and our immediate subconscious goes into that used car salesman or that kind of janky, slick dude, that's still sitting in the back of our mind, which inhibits us from moving forward with activity. And if we're not moving with activity that reinforces the positive side of sales, then we're actually just continuing that cycle of those results going, well, salespeople are usually kind of dirty and all that kind of thought processes. They're sleazy, they're sneaky. And so that then is my thinking. It's like, well, now I'm a salesperson. I know that I'm different. And so I've got to be different than that. But what I'm doing is reaffirming that thought in my brain, which then is still remaining my programming. And so I'm encouraging all of you guys, as we're doing this, reframe the way that we think about sales, so that then we're considering language of sales. And we think about sales as a way to converse, or how to talk to people, how to get them into the mindset to move forward. It's not a manipulation that we're doing, which is what a lot of people would say. It's not manipulation. It's clearing the way for them to have a secure thought in what they want, like their desires. And so we are really advocates if we want to be advocates. If you want to be a dirty car salesman, you can be a dirty car salesman. That will get you into transaction. It'll never get you into relationship. And then in this business, we need relationships to be able to endure the longevity. So we're going to continue to go back to this. We've got to reframe our thinking, so that then when our thinking changes, our feelings change, our actions change, we get different results, and it reprograms, it removes into our ideas, our thoughts. And now our programming has changed to go like, oh my gosh, I am actually good at this. Oh my gosh, I am an advocate. And now I start thinking of sales as an advocacy moment. And when I think about that, I feel like it's an advocate. I feel good about it. My actions move towards advocacy. And then the results are advocacy, which then reframes my programming, okay? I want to keep going back to this. You should write this down somewhere, so that then when you get into this little crazy spin cycle, you can keep coming back to this thought process, because it really will help you in everything that you do to think about things differently. Because when we think about things differently, when we look at things differently, the things we look at change, okay? So moving on into the next little space here, and I want to make sure, I think our live may have pooped out a little bit. And if that's a Facebook Live anyways, and so if that's true, it is what it is. And we'll just take him, drop the recording over there. So Crystal, if you could make sure that we get that dropped in later, that'd be awesome. Okay, so moving on to the next thing. Guys, today we're going to be talking about objections, and we're going to talk about objections based off of the book Objections, okay? And so this is a really great book. I think every single one of us should consider getting it, should consider reading it, should consider like adding it into your world. And I really actually enjoyed this book. So we're going to be looking at the ideas behind this. And the reason why I wanted to do that, there's a lot of ideas and a lot of commonalities about objection handling. And yet what this guy did when he wrote this book, he really looked at what is the common thread of objections. And if we're really looking at it only as objections, then we 100% can answer the objection and or move past the objection faster without even having a great scripting dialogue. We can actually move into this space easier when we understand what each of these objections are. So I wanted to use a resource that all of us could gravitate back to and actually master these things. And so I would look at the book Objections, and it's Jeb Blunt is the one who wrote this particular book. So objections. The very first objection is going to be those prospecting objections. This is about having that 5-step phone process. Okay, so prospecting objections. When you're looking at this, you've got to be able to go through this in your phone process, right? So when I get somebody on the phone, I've got to be able to get their attention. I've got to be able to identify myself. I've got to be able to tell them what I want. I got to bridge to a because, right? I've got to get them into an idea of because, and then I have to ask for what I want, okay? And so while I'm going into this and understanding this idea about prospecting objections is that one of the first things that we can do for getting rid of objections, right? The best way to be able to have a great objection handling is to never have objections really pop up. That's all he's really driving at in this idea of prospecting objections. And if we have clarity around what we're really digging into, what will happen is their objections will fall in line with understanding what my results are, what I want as a result from the conversation, and then I can direct them. So if I go in with this 5-step process and I get their attention, in the midst of them objecting anything in that attention space, I know that was my very first thing. And so if they have an objection right out of the gate about getting their attention, i.e., I call them and I say, hey, is this the owner of 123 Main Street? Or hey, is this the whatever that opening line is? If they immediately go into, I don't have any desire to talk to you today, like, right? So they have some sort of objection right then and right there. You haven't even made it through your first phase yet. So you can 100% begin your objection handling in that space, right? Hey, I don't have any time to talk to you. Awesome, I understand that. So again, I want to make sure you can get your home sold, right? Getting your attention. I want to get your home sold, or I want to make sure and align you with the right, if it had something to do with mortgage, I want to align you with the right person to be able to get your mortgage question answered. It's like, oh, well, right. So there's an attention side of things. Now, obviously, this is going to be along the lines of understanding why you're making the phone call. There's a why you made the phone call that's going to be in that attention grabbing section, right? But you've got to be able to get their attention. And so as I move through each of these steps, the way I handle objections then are going to be filtered into each one of these moments. If they hit me right out of the gate, I reframe it, and my objection handling is 100% about maintaining or getting back their attention. Identifying myself is going to be real easy. I don't know that you will find a whole lot that will kind of pop up into this space. I don't think somebody's going to go, oh, you're a liar, I don't want to talk to you, or you're not who you said you were. So identifying yourself isn't really anything more than a movement forward, right? I got your attention. I am somebody. The main thing that people will object to the identifying of yourself is this. If I am truly doing a lead generation moment, the question that somebody wants to answer is threefold. They want to know, do you care? Can you help me? And can I trust you? Well, if you identify yourself in a way that like provides a false into any of those questions, then you haven't really identified yourself in a great space. You've got to be able to identify yourself in the way that you want to be able to have an outcome from the conversation. And so this is really this is a 5-step phone process so that then I can get beyond the immediate objections that usually would filter into my world. So if I go through this rapid fire and I identify this and I have this ready as my conversation starter, I can then listen for where their objections are going and how I can direct that conversation. Tell them what you want. You've got to be really concise. Like, what do you want? Tell them what you want. There's no challenge in telling people what they want. You don't have to create this whole curvy end around conversation to get them into a space of understanding why you called. It could be very serious. Well, look, I'm calling you because I want to be able to sell your house. And I noticed that you had it on the market and then it failed to sell. I want to do that because, right, I'm bridging to it because in my firm, I find that we get the opportunity to help people just like you sell their homes when the first agent failed. And this is our success story. And so what I'd love to do is set an appointment with you right now, right? Ask for what you want. And at that moment, if you've gone through and really been able to identify each of these things and you can go through it pretty quickly, then what you've done is set the landscape for objections to have clarity, right? So they will give you more true reasons than just straight up objections, right? And we go back to the jeans in the store. I go in to buy a pair of jeans. Person meets me. Hey, can I help you? I say, no, I'm just looking. Really, all I did was object to the fact that you wanted to help me. It gives us that moment when we have that clarity. It changes the way we talk to people. And we go in with a certainty of why we're having the conversation with them. And then it gets them into a space where they can't answer the question in a mode that kind of deflects. Like, no, I'm just looking, right? No, I'm just looking is such a cop-out for anything. No, I'm just looking is 100% a cop-out. So when we're digging into this moment, why I'm spending so much time here is that not enough of us put enough process in building our system for making phone calls. And so we get hit with objections right out of the gate, and we don't even know how to handle them because we've never really started to put a process together. And so then we start chasing their objections versus making sure they're online or in tune to why we're having the conversation and what we want to be able to move forward for what we ultimately want, which is usually in this space going to be like an appointment of some sorts. Okay. I'm hoping this makes sense. And you guys, please, honestly, like write comments or bring questions into the chat box, and then I'll have Crystal narrate those for us as we go, because this is really important. I want to be able to help you, and I want to make sure that we can align with these things. All of this should be actionable into our businesses. Otherwise, we're just consuming content for content's sake, which is entertainment. So go watch a movie. It's more entertaining to watch a movie than to watch me. I'm just going to say it. Like, I'm not as cool as Fast and the Furious 9. It's just true. Although I don't even know if that's one that's out yet. And it's also a joke because Fast and the Furious, I think I might be more entertaining than 9 series of a movie that should have been done with 1. Okay, hopefully this is making sense to you guys. Go ahead and obviously bring those comments in. I want to help. I want to make sure that we can have actionable items into our world. So that's the idea behind prospecting objections. Now, I will tell you, he goes into a little bit more depth on understanding like how to format this in a way that can always be a movement forward in the conversations that you're having. Okay, so moving into these prospecting objections, these are going to be the main things that you get inside of a prospecting objection. Okay, an RBO, which is a reflex, a brush off, or a true objection, and you've got to be able to identify these things. So if you've been able to set up your conversation exactly into those 5 points, then those true objections are coming in. And so the reflex that's just the immediate, no, I'm just looking, right? The brush off, let's set an appointment for in the future, or we'll talk about this later. I can't do this right now, or I'm not the guy you want to talk to. Or you're going to get the true objection. And so if you see the reflex or the brush off coming, you can easily latch into that and create space for them to come with their true objections, because once you can answer their true objections, once you can give some clarity around their objections, what you're really doing is you're driving away fear. So most all of us have a fear tendency in anything that's coming along. That's just our brain reacting in survival mode. So if somebody wants to sell me something, I'm immediately going to go into that skeptic moment of, does this make sense to me? Is this the best thing for me? How do I make sure I can bring clarity to it? Is to push it away as far as I can, as fast as I can, not even understand what the ability for it to help me is. I do this all the time. I actually had this moment where I had a guy who, he called me and called me and called me wanting to sell me a service for the brokerage. And I'm real good about, like, I brush that crap off all the time because so many people bring that to us and very few of them are actually helping me or helping our agents that I don't even want to entertain any of them. I'll go search out the things that I want, right? This is the way most of us are. No, I'm just looking. And then this dude caught me one day and I'm driving in my car And finally I answered the phone and he caught me. I was like, you got me. I said, all right, so now you've got me captive for 10 minutes. I'm going to go get my tires changed. I actually didn't mean to answer the phone, but I did. So it's serendipitous. You've got time to go. But before I finish this, I'm curious. I know that you have a call log right there because you reach out to me all the time. How many times have you reached out to me? And the dude had called me 103 times in like a span of maybe 6 months. Like that's tremendous follow-up. I gave him brush-offs all the time. And we got into the space where I was able to answer him with a true objection, and he was able to answer that to be able to get me beyond my fear of being protective of the brokerage. And it was actually a service that we ended up installing in our brokerage. So that's the biggest thing. And I say that example as a space of when you find yourself into these reflex or these brush off moments, a lot of times that's just a protective situation. That's a fear, and that's protecting myself. But if you really believe in what you're doing or what you can do, you'll easily be able to get beyond that. And so when you get these things, here's the biggest deal. When you see a true objection come in, right? You should be able to handle reflex and brush offs. That'll be real simple. If somebody a quick reflex, it's like, hey, you know what? I just don't have time right now. Awesome. Sounds like you have time someday. So what does next week look like for you at 2 p.m.? It's like, well, shit, you got me, right? So it's easy to be able to speak to that. And you do that enough with balance, so they more than likely will get to a true objection of like, look, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not spending any money right now in our business whatsoever. Awesome. In the future, you may spend money, and I want to make sure you have this information. Would it be okay that we have 10 minutes of conversation? Even right now, I can give you the 10 minutes you need. It's like, man, you know what? Yeah, let's go. Let's do this thing. And so we're able to get beyond their brush off, get beyond their reflex, and get them into a space of true objection. Once they're in a true objection moment, can you turn the objection around and meet anyway, right? So exactly what I just did. Can I turn that objection around to meet anyway? Hey man, we're spending $0. Awesome. You know what? My company's spending $0 right now. And my expectation is that you would probably not spend any money for the next 6 months. And if we got to the next 6 months and you're able to find a service that could exponentially grow your agent's business, would it be worth us having a 10-minute conversation now so that then we can be prepped for what the future holds for us? Man, you know what, Randy? Yeah, even in my agitation, I might say yes to some of those things, okay? So can we turn it around, shift gears and gather more information, right? We can shift our gears and get some more information, especially around buying windows, contracts, budget, size of opportunity, competitors, stakeholders, all that stuff. So if somebody gives me a true objection, I might be able to turn that into a moment to gather information and have that now for another call. Have that for another space. If I'm really sitting here thinking about this and I go in and I'm like, hey, this is Randy. I want to be able to help you sell your home, blah, 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 blah. Went through my conversation, all that stuff. And they hit me with a true objection of like, hey man, here's the deal. Like I, in the time right now, have no desire to do anything except for protect my fort. And you're not somebody that sounds like you want to protect my fort. You know what, Mr. Buyer, or Mr. Seller, I can truly understand that. So let me ask you this. What are the main things that you're doing to protect your fort? Because that might be some things that I could do for my clients as well. All right, so I just got into a subservience position, and he may go into those like, gosh, I'm cutting my budget, I'm cutting my expenses, I'm cutting this, I'm cutting that. It's like he starts going through all of the stuff that he's protective because like he still feels a sense to defend himself. Well, in that moment, I'm listening to everything that's most important to him, right? In that moment, I've just given him a window to tell me everything that's most important. And if I'm taking great notes, I can really dig into it. And I can understand like where his kids are, where his budget is, what's happening with his stuff, what's going on with his home. I can truly get into that space and ask the next question that may help me be prepared when I do make this call again in the next 6 months. So how can you shift gear to start gathering information? And there's a million ways in which you can turn that conversation or that question. Even just going straight into it, it's like, oh man, I understand that. So if you were to sell, what would your window be? Like, is there any window right here that makes sense to you? No, and no matter what their conversation gets into, even if it's defensive, what they're doing is speaking from a space of more than likely it's that fear moment still boiling up inside of them. It's that objection still boiling up inside of them. But think about the information that you're gathering as all that keeps spinning and keeps turning. I can't believe that you would call me. Right now, everything's falling apart. Do you know that I lost my job? Do you know that my kids are at home? I got 4 kids at home now that I'm trying to figure out how to homeschool. I don't have time to think about this. I don't have time to have this conversation. you've just derailed my day by, right? So here's that angry moment. And some of us have had these moments. Well, in that angry moment, what did he just do? Most of us get a little defensive when we start hearing these things. And yet this guy just gave me all of the information about his family that I could come back to later once the agitation has died down. You know, it's interesting, and I read this all the time for a lot of people who do their main lead generation through expired and terminated. Those guys get an inundation with phone calls. They're called all day long. And inevitably, they will call the same person back on another day. And when they answer their phone, they're like, hey, this is Jill. They're like, hey, Jill, this is Randy. I was just giving you a call about your home. Oh, you know what? Hey, you caught me at a bad time, but can I call you back in 2 minutes? Absolutely. This is my cell number. And they call back, and it's great. Well, I called you 2 days ago, and you cussed me out. They don't always remember what's happening or who you are, and especially if you're calling them in a moment with high emotional tension. And right now, you never know what's going on and what's happening in the home for those high emotional moments. And that can happen whether COVID is around or whether it's a beautiful day and it's awesome. We never know what's happening in the filters of people's lives. And so the only thing that we can do is remain consistent, understand what's happening, shift gears, gather more information, and we can call up and we can call on them another day and be able to utilize that information and go, hey, I know the last time when we talked, it was a lot of tension. How's everything going? It's like, it's actually normal. That awesome. So it sounds like you're saying the tension has resolved itself a little bit. You know what, Randy? It has resolved itself a little bit. Awesome. Sounds like you're still a little agitated at my phone call. Yeah, I am, because you're calling me back again, but everything is still normal. And that's okay, Randy. I just wanted to make sure that I could touch base with you because, like, I meant it. When I'm here to help people, I'm really here to help people. I won't take any more of your time up, Randy, but would it be okay that I call you back when maybe you have some more time to talk about what it looks like to get your family ultimately where you wanted to go? Like, I know that one day you'll have a job that'll fit back into place. I know that one day your kids will be back in school. I know that one day everything will actually be lined back up, and I want to be the guy that can help you find the solution for what's next. But, well, that has changed my ability to have conversation, because when I spoke to him, I could speak directly into what's happening in his world, okay? And the last thing is just to hang up and move on, okay? Come back, do the prospect a better time. Like, do it at a different time. Hang up. If they're yelling at you, they don't got anything going on. It's like, all right, man, I'm sorry, bye. Hang up. Call back another time. This kind of goes back to that idea. Sometimes they will not understand or even remember what had happened at that point. Hang up, call them back. Okay? These are prospecting objections. The way that you can actually get into a true objection moment, though, is to make sure that you have a process in place. You don't necessarily even have to do this 5-step phone process. However, I will tell you, if you have a process in place, you can get to your ending faster by getting to their objections, their true objections first. And that's beyond the reflex, that's beyond the brush off and understanding their true objections, okay? So this is in the prospecting side of things. Next, I want to talk about red herring, and I apologize for the cough. I am dealing with allergies and getting over a cold, okay? Red herring objection. A red herring objection is something your stakeholder does, says, or asks that distracts you from their focus, is misleading, or diverts your attention from the objective of the sales conversation, okay? When you think about red herring objections, this is usually how it comes in. I come in, we're talking about it. I may be sitting down with you to have a listing presentation. We're going through this conversation about what to do. And then all of a sudden you go, hey, you know what, Billy down the road, his property taxes were super high because another home sold for super low in our neighborhood. The price per square foot was way off. And I only know this because he told me. What do you think about, like, what's happening there, and how's that going to affect what we're doing? It's not. It isn't. There's nothing in that conversation. What they did was just picked out something that they're truly curious about. Let's not just dismiss the fact that this objection popped up, but it had nothing really to do with happening right now with this moment for going through the listing presentation and getting the best price for his home. He's legit in what he wants to do, but it's not really there. So the red herring objections, this is the way in which he says in that book to really deal with these. One is just to pause. Okay, so you just pause, let them be able to get it all out. Once they get it all out, that may have been the only thing, and then you move on with your thing, all right? So you just pause. You can acknowledge it, so just simply take notes. So as you're going through it, You acknowledge it. Oh, awesome. You know what? Taking notes. And then I continue in. You can ignore it completely. So you can get to the end of it and just go straight back into your presentation without having any issues. Like, let them finish and just go. Or then you can save it. Obviously, saving it for later to be able to come back to. And so there's obviously real simple ways in which you do that. You go in and you truly go through and you just like, awesome. You know what, Randy, that is a great conversation that we do need to have when we talk about our property taxes. So I'm going to save that as a note that we're going to come back to and have a conversation about that. But let's get back to what we were talking about with the pricing of your home, because you draw a great line between your property and his. When you look at the properties around you, what do you feel is the price that your home should gather, right? So now I've gone through and I've 100% got the moment handled so that I can get back to my presentation. Because what happens when I start chasing that red herring and I do this? You know what? Actually, that's a great conversation, because when you look at his home, it's this, this, and this, and these are the reasons why it didn't sell, and these are some of the things why it went for that price. I know that, so you start giving him all the reasons in the red herring. Well, in that, he's going to go, well, my house is much better than his, and yet I paid less in property taxes. Why is that? Well, so here's, you're right. So now I start to answer that question. And then so a red herring diverts us, and it will divert us long enough to where we won't ever actually be able to get back into our sales presentation, because more than likely what happens is we talk too much and we handle one objection and we never actually show that we're a solution based for them. And they've looked at it as gaining all of their knowledge. And so now they don't need you. And so it's a really weird thing. Once we chase red herrings, we're going to lose their attention span for what we really want them to be, which is objective in our sales presentation. Okay. So when we're looking at red herring objections, one of the best things is going to have this sales call agenda framework, right? So open the conversation by setting a relaxed professional tone, demonstrating respect, and confirming the time allotted for your meeting. Objective. Next, define all the call objective to your prime stakeholder for taking the next step. Check the stakeholder's agenda next. Check to see if the stakeholder had anything else on their agenda. Is there anything else that you want to be covered, want to make sure that we could sure this covered, and then control. So this is what this framework looks like. So I go in prospecting, right? Prospecting is about a whole different process of when I'm making the call. This red herring objections, right? So this sales call agenda, to be able to get beyond these red herring objections that tend to chase the trail, it's to be able to go in, have these open, right? So now I've got this structure. I go in, I'm going to set the conversation. Hey, this is Randy. This is what we're going to do. I've got 30 minutes that you said that we could meet. And so I'm going to make sure we go through everything that we need to cover in this moment so that you can make the best decision for you and your family. So we're going to go through this, we're going to go through this, and we're going to go through this, and we're going to go through this. Was there anything else that you were making sure that we covered so that then at the end of this meeting, we can be sure to sign the paperwork to get your home sold for the best price? Because that's what you want, right? Yes. I want to cover these things. Sweet. Let's get started. And in the start, we 100% now have control. They have clarity about where we're going. And if they had one of those true red herrings that was just boiling up inside of them, like the property tax conversation, he might mention it right here, right now, and he's not going to derail me as I'm giving all of the reasons, all the value proposition for my business, and helping him understand how that's going to align, and I can be an advocate for him. Okay. All right, so we've gone through 2 sets of objections and understanding now, if I understand how those objections work, I truly can, regardless of what my scripting may be or learning the process for real estate objection handling, I actually have a framework for any objection handling. If I hear a red herring coming my way, I know how to handle it. I know how to actually make sure that I can make note of it and move beyond it, staying in the lane, staying in control, okay? Am I prospecting objections? Am I being like truly a reflex? Am I truly being like diverted? Or am I actually having like the brush off? Or am I actually getting a true objection? Because when I get the true objection, I know how to handle that true objection, right? It's about getting into the space of giving clarity and having them open up all the doors. And one of the ways, if you notice, the ways in which we can do that is having a structure when we go into any of these calls, any of these presentations. Once we have structure and we understand where we want to come out of it, we can truly have clarity around everything, okay? So red herring objections. Next thing we're going to talk to is these micro commitment objections. I need to drink a quick drink of water. Okay, micro commitment objections. Every meeting should end in a contract or a closed next step, which leads us to these micro objections, right? This is our way to really test the water and see what's happening. So it's to move past micro commitment objections. We use a 3-step framework, and this is it. So the ledge, that's exactly why I ask. All right. So they're at that ledge, and they have this moment of these micro objections, right? And a micro objection for something like that. You know what, Randy? I don't know if I'm ready to sign this paperwork or not, because, like, gosh, I don't know if there's anybody else that I need to be talking to. That's exactly why I asked that question, so that we can open up that door and really dig into that. May I explain what, right? So it's that moment of coming in, they're on the ledge, they're in that moment, and we get to be able to help them understand how to move forward. So that's exactly why I asked. That's a ledge moment, right? They're right there to say yes, and they got this little bitty micro objection of like, man, but I've got another agent. Yeah, I want to sign paperwork with you. You sound awesome, all that good stuff. I got another agent who's going to come by later for me to talk to. You know what? That's exactly why I asked. Or, you know what? That's exactly why we're meeting right now. So it's like giving them, like, it's an empathetic moment of saying, like, you know what? I'm glad you said that, because you're 100% right. That should be something that's feeling weird inside of you, which is why I actually wanted to have that conversation. Can I explain? Right? So it's our moment to be able to give them the benefit of feeling right in that moment. So in the micro commitment moment, we give them the ability to feel right. To explain value. Value is in the eye of the beholder. They want to know what's in it for me, right? And so there's 3 basic reasons why a stakeholder will agree to your micro commitment request. 1 is emotional value, 2 is insight value, or 3 is going to be tangible value, okay? And so if I'm really looking to get them into a micro commitment, I need to more than likely dig into one of these 3 spaces, right? So I need to dig into the emotional value. Hey, why don't we set the next appointment to be able to have me come by your house and actually go through what the sales process looks like, so that you and your family can sell your home in the amount of time that perfectly gets you aligned with getting your mother into, you know, the home that she needs to be in, or getting your kids into the school systems they need to be, right? This is attaching back to some of the things that they said, the reasons why they need to sell their home, their big motivation. Insight value. It's like, you know what? If we don't move forward today, one of the things that could potentially happen is that the rates adjust dramatically, and now our pool of buyers just shrunk, and your ability to get your home sold in time might be lost. Those are those little micro, like, right? So there's a little, I'm testing it. I'm giving you a little bit more insight. I'm giving you more insight to what's happening. I'm getting into those closing moments. And then obviously tangible value is going to be understanding, like, the things that I can gain from all this stuff. So a ledge moment is me being able to, like, give them the opportunity to feel right, okay? And then I get to be able to dig back into it and kind of come back to another micro commitment. What would it look like then if we do this? What would it look like then if you're so concerned about the time? What if we sign a listing agreement for 3 months? If we can't do it in 3 months, we put it on hold for a long time. You know, it's our little moments to be able to figure out where they're at. And then again, it's to ask. So once you've explained the value of your micro commitment request, ask again, okay? So that's what's really interesting. So I go through, they stop me, I answer it, ask again. So why don't we sign the paperwork right now so that you can get where you need to go? They may object again, which is, like, you got to look at all these opportunities for objections. What you're really learning about them are the things that drive the most fear or the most curiosity, which really is getting you to a point to understanding what's most important to them. If they really are worried about one of these things and it's a true objection, I'm actually learning what's most important to them. And so it's not this cat and mouse game of me going, oh, now here we go, another lap. It's like, oh my gosh, you're continually opening the book to me to learn more about you. This is fabulous. This is phenomenal. This is what I want in my world, okay? So micro commitment objections is getting them to move on to the next thing. This can be very little and even spliced into any of your presentations. At one point, I could have a conversation about Awesome. And one of the things that we're going to do in this process, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, is that I have a tendency to work with only the clients who want to work with me. And we go through a buyer's representation agreement. Can I explain what that is? Yes, blah, 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 blah. So this is where you would sign that. So this is where that is. I'm going to put that right there for you guys so that we can sign it at the end of the meeting. Would that be okay? Really what they're answering is yes. They've got to be able to answer yes. They could say no, but then again, that's a micro commitment moment. It's like, oh, no. I'm just making sure that you understand that, like, for you to work with me, this is something that we need to do, and that would be okay, right? Right. So you following me here? We're getting this moment of these little bitty commitment moments for them, because if I splice them into my presentation the whole way, it will make them feel more confident of, like, they've paved the path for us to be able to work together, because I've cued them in to where they have the most control and where I can help them the most as an advocate, right? And so as we're going through, if I'm working through this presentation and we get to the point, it was like, and blah, 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 blah. So at the end of the day, one of the things that makes the most sense for buyers is to have that pre-qualification, because you've seen that once we have that pre-qualification, you would agree, now we have the ability to go purchase a home, understanding exactly where our purchasing power is, right? Right. Awesome. So I know that you said that you're dealing with a lender right now. So before we go search for homes, we'll get you into a space where you have that same pre-qualification letter because you want that power, right? Right. Awesome. Good. Right. So these little bitty micro commitments, so that now they can get into it. They can still have the objections, but then we go, awesome. You know what? I can understand why you don't want to do that and you have a fear about the credit score. Have a conversation about that. So it does make sense, right, that we need to get this pre-qualification done before we go look at homes, right? Right. So we get to these moments of these little micro objections, with these real micro commitments, and then their objections to those moments help us to keep everything moving at a pace forward. And then they feel, because it's small things, once you get to the end and you get into the listing side of things, right? And I'm like, okay, so here's the paperwork that you would sign. Well, if I presented that at the very end, there's a good chance that they're going to go, oh man, well, here's all of the things. But if I spliced in these micro commitments, I've already been able to open up all of their objections the whole way. And so they're not really going to have a very strong objection at the end. They may have a couple of minor things that we need to speak about where I missed the value. And then now everything is easier. It's easier because I have all the information that I've gathered through the whole presentation, because I've been able to listen, because I spliced in these moments. I'm hoping this is making sense, guys. I know this is a lot to consume. I'm going to make sure all of these slides go to you guys. I know that we've had a hiccup with some people getting them. So if you need these slides, go ahead and make sure your email is in the comment box. Or if you're on the forum, make sure that your list, make sure that you just kind of raise your hand that you want these slides. Okay. The buying commitment objections. Okay. So buying commitment objections. This is when we really get them into the space of pulling the trigger. And there's a 5-step buying commitment objection turnaround framework. Okay. The first thing is to relate. I can get how you feel that way. Simply relating to them as a person, non-judgmental agreement causes your stakeholder to feel that you get them, right? This is the empathetic. You know what? I get why you might feel that way. You know what? I understand that you're a little fearful right now about moving forward, right? Yes, I am. Okay. And you're probably a little bit nervous about what the economy is going to do, right? Yes, I am. And you would agree that you do understand, though, how selling your home in today's market could benefit you also, correct? Yeah. Yeah, I get all that, right? So getting them into a space to relate. Isolate and clarify, right? So we've related. Now we're isolating and clarifying. So to isolate, to deal effectively with a buying commitment objection, right? So we're at the point to close the deal. You got to isolate and prioritize each of the objections before moving on. So it's like one of those moments. So awesome. Well, other than this, though, what else is bothering you about our proposal? So it's like, what else is bothering you? So I hear you saying this. What else is bothering you? Because if I can get you to start listing those things, I can understand where your priorities are for how we can get through this deal to get to next. Essentially, you're giving me the framework of how to move you forward. And so then we got to clarify. So never ever assume that you know what your stakeholder means. Always clarify. The key to clarifying step is asking open-ended questions to get your buyer talking and expressing their real concerns. I'm just curious. When you say our prices are too high, what does that mean from your standpoint, right? hey, I hear what you're saying. So when you say that you feel weird about paying this much commission, what do you mean by too much? What is your stand on that? It's like, well, I'm going to be doing blah, blah, blah. So really their commitment wasn't about commission. It was about value and whose activity list was longer. Well, now you have the moment to say, oh, well, now I understand. So here's the investment that I'm going to be making into your listing. And you start listing the actual true value of what it's going to cost them. And I can actually the true time commitment that's going to cost them and all that. And I'm going to cover all of this so that really what you're worried about in this space, this list that you created, you're only going to do these 3 things because I'm going to take such great care of you as my client. So that's why I, get into the conversation about the value moment, right? And I know I'm using a very loose kind of objection as far as commission, but this could fit into anything, right? I'm just curious, like, what do you mean by that? So when you say that you have a challenge with the time frame, what's your biggest concern with the time frame? You find it like really interesting that some people get a little bit nervous. A lot of us agents think it's awesome when we can do things so fast. Like, hey man, we can get your home sold in 30 to 45 days. Isn't that awesome? No, for some people that stresses them out. They have no idea. So when they get to the moment of like, man, I'm just super nervous about the time frame, you immediately think it's going to take longer, and you start addressing that objection and be like, oh man, no, you don't have to worry about that. I've got everything so succinct that it doesn't matter. We could sell this home in 7 days or 14 days and it will feel awesome. Well, now you just added to the stress when they were thinking in 30 days or 45 days, I'm going to be homeless. Am I even going to have a home to move into? And so we didn't address what they meant by your time frame makes me nervous. Awesome. What makes you nervous about the time frame? I might not have a home. That's a valid concern. Are you okay if we dig through some of these things? Is there anything else that you would have some challenges with? Well, yeah, you also said X, Y, and Z. Okay. And so if we can bring some clarity to that, what do you mean by blah, 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 blah? Awesome. So now they've structured my way in which I can isolate their fears, squash them, bring value to the story, and help them move forward. And so we really understand objections when we start to look at objections differently, it's about them confessing. They've just confessed everything to us of why and where their fears and worries are. And now we have a true roadmap of how we can actually bring value into their world because they've told us exactly what to do. Okay. Buying commitment, the second or the third thing, minimizing. So minimizing is the process of reducing the emotional size of your stakeholder's objection while maximizing the value of your proposal by reminding them of their pain, desires, wants, needs, and opportunities, and reminding them of what they've already agreed to. All of the yeses, obviously, that you've corrected, those little micro commitments, and showing them the brighter future. All right, so hey, I understand, and you're feeling a lot of anxiety right now, right? Yeah, I am. And yeah, when we look at the anxiety and we look at what you're going to be able to gain, like you talked about being able to move and being closer to family, right? Yeah. And you talked about being able to have a lower home price so that your monthly budget is now dropped tremendously, right? Right. And what that budget is going to do to be able to get your kids into private school, right? Right. And then talking about being able to get your home priced properly that you noticed and how much traction that's going to give you in the market, right? Right. And then that's going to give you some leverage when you go to purchase your next home because we're able to actually have a real succinct contract in place, right? Right. So we get into those moments to where now their heightened moment of like, starts to lower a little bit because we've reminded them of the value. We've reminded them why they want to get into this. And we're actually showing them the light at the end of the tunnel. We've said this is possible, and we're just relating all that back into the space. Now, minimizing, you got to be careful of this. You can't just say, well, it's no big deal. Okay? No, it's not a big deal, guys. Like, I understand where you're coming from, but this is not a big deal. Let me tell you why it's not a big deal. You've just taken their fear and said, oh, you're being a sissy. We've kind of mocked them in a way if we're not careful with the way we minimize. So what we don't do is minimize it by addressing it that it's little. We minimize it by talking about the emotional size of it, shrinking into the value of moving to next. So their anxiety looks like this, but compared to their benefit, it looks like this because their benefits are this, okay? So it really is about making sure that we can have the conversations that narrow everything into the lane that they can understand. You don't minimize it by saying, well, it's a lot littler, it's a lot less, it's not as big as you think. Like you're looking at it wrong, right? because then we've just actually mocked their fear, and there ain't nothing worse than mocking somebody's fear. I will go defensive on you, and I will shut you down. They will too, okay? This is a lot. Objections is a lot. Like, this is going to be a lot for you to be able to consume, and we'll make sure you get these slides. Buying commitment objections. So 5-step going into the number 4, right? So ask confidently and assumptively for what you want. So when there's a buying commitment objection, they go, hey, you know what? I just don't think now's the time. I think now is the time because what we currently know could change tomorrow. So wouldn't it make sense that we get your home on the market today as soon as possible so you can get the best benefit out of what's happening around us and gain with confidence the value that you already know is there? Like, when you put it that way, Randy, right? So just ask. We get into a space where we don't get into an ask. We kind of get to a close. They object. We get timid. We tuck our tails, and we're like, okay, well, I'll let you sleep on it. Like, ask confidently back. Like, I want to get your home sold. I think now is the best time. You don't have to take my word for it because I'm going to be around for forever. And yet, if you want my opinion, I'm watching things, right? And so you get to kind of go into that spin. Okay? And then the last one is to fall back on an alternative. You must get something, okay? So if they start to just fall apart, if everything starts to crumble, you must get to something. So he talks about a lot of things as big commitment sales. And so this example, like schedule a meeting beginning with the implementation process, additional demo, pilot or trial period, smaller purchase alternative or package, have your best alternative or fall back on. Like, okay, so this is his taken from his book, but the way this translates into our world, if I'm gonna be able to fall back on something, this is my moment of, okay, so here's the deal, Randy. I understand that everything is a little bit nerve-wracking, and you think if I can't get it done now, that I'm gonna have a challenge getting it done later. So why don't we do this? Let's give ourselves 3 months. If we can't get what you need in 90 days, we'll take it off the market, and I will 100% make sure that it costs you $0. I won't ask for anything back just to make sure that I can prove to you that I can do what I said we can do. Or, hey, you know what, Randy, I understand what you're going with, and I understand that you're having some challenges. So what would it look like if I came by and I showed you a few of the stories of the homes that we've sold right here, right now, and so that you can at least understand it with a little bit more perception about what is possible? Could I do that? Maybe, right? I don't know. And you better have stories to be able to fall back on. Hey, Randy, I tell you what, why don't you do this? Open up your phone right now. I have an app that I want to show you kind of some of the processes that we do, because maybe I'm not being able to connect enough of X, Y, and Z. So let's log in and get you connected to my app so you can see the way in which a consumer would view your home and be able to purchase it within days. Right? So it's these little moments. How can you fall back on getting them to say yes to something so that in the buying commitment, you don't lose them completely because they've disconnected the value, okay? All right, objection handling for real estate. And this is where we're going to end today. Objection handling for real estate. I find that there are 3 most common objections in real estate. I'm just looking / just curious, right? Buyer calls. I want to do 123 Main Street. Can you give me some information? Awesome. Are you looking to purchase a home? No, I'm really just looking right now. Or I'm just curious about what's happening in the market. Hey, I wanted to see if you could, what my neighbor's house sold. I saw that you sold their house and it sold pretty quickly. What would my house sell for? Awesome. I'd love to be able to come by. No. I was just curious, right? If those are going to be your most common objections, you should immediately know where to go. When somebody says, I'm just looking, I should be able to automatically respond, awesome, so what are you looking for? Instead of digging into just chasing that little moment or getting it as a brush off. I can ask a very direct question to get back into it, right? So if I know these objections are coming, I should then have a pretty standard response. That standard response is going to do 2 things for me. It will give me time to think, and it'll give them time to think. And the best thing that comes out of that is they start searching for answers, and they're going to start opening up the door because they weren't ready for me to ask them a different question. They were ready for me just to answer them. Hey man, how much is this house? Hey, that's a really great house. A lot of people have been interested in it. What do you love most about this house? It's like, oh, well, right. So now in that moment, they were expecting me to go $2,100. Obviously it's not 2,100 bucks, 2,100 bucks. It's like, okay, cool. Hang up the phone. Or, hey, well, yeah, you know, a lot of people are looking into that home. So what's most interesting to you about that house? Oh, well, I love the blah, 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 right? So it gave me a chance to listen to him and to make sure that there's space in there I can ask the right next question, okay? So if these are my most common objections, what can I do to already prefabricate something to be able to respond when these moments hit us so that then we have time to think, they have time to respond, and we can listen to where their real needs are. Oh, we're just going to wait. We're just waiting. You ready to do this? No, we're just waiting. We're just waiting. Everybody's just waiting. We're going to wait. Right? Awesome. What are you waiting for? Well, blah, 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 right? Most people will have to answer, well, what are you waiting for? Oh, we just want to wait. Cool. So what elements have to happen to line up to where waiting turns into doing? Well, we need, right? So you just keep rephrasing that question to be able to get them into the space. Let me sleep on it. Let me discuss it with X, Y, Z, or another delay style of objection, right? Let me sleep on it. Oh, we're going to think about it. Oh, I need to discuss it with X, Y, and Z. Like, if these are my true #1 objections that are going to come from real estate, and they really are, these are the most common ones that'll get us into the next stage of objections, right? So these are the most common that are going to try to derail us. And yet there are going to be other objections that are going to come into play where they are going to get into the real nature of where their challenges are, right? So these are the 3 most common, and I can respond to these like that. Now I have the ability to get into the real content of why or what or how they're being motivated to be curious, to be inquisitive, okay? So what I would love for you guys to do, think about your ahas from this. We're going to send it to you. Make sure I want you to think about it. Think about your ahas. And I want you to start picking out a partner, right? Work on the handling of these 3 objections. Those 3 main objections, what do they look like? We worked on, what worked and what didn't, like, right? So I want you to start practicing your role playing, like what objections worked, what objection handling didn't, so that you can start like matching in that group. We can start figuring out like, these are some of the most common things. These are how I responded. These things worked really well. This is now how I respond to that conversation every time to move forward. The other thing that I've done, and I'll make sure Crystal has a copy of this, and he'll send it out to you with these slides, is that there's 40 objections document that I borrowed from somebody else and just kind of regurgitated for our agents, and I'll make sure and get it out to everyone. And it's really just 40 objection handlings. So it's just going through, somebody has written objection handling for 40 pretty prominent questions that you would gain in real estate. So it's just a really quick document for you to put into practice in your world. And that way you can help have some objection handling moments. But the biggest thing is to understand in objections, we're going to get prospecting objections because we're doing the prospecting side of things. There's a way in which we can handle those by being prepared. We're going to get red herring objections. They're going to derail us and move us into a space that we don't want to be in. Well, there's a way to handle that to be able to move forward, right? There's buying objections that come at us. There's ways that we can handle that, right? So there's structure in which we can handle all of these objections so that then what we're always doing is moving forward in the direction for what we need out of this, like right out of this conversation, out of this moment, out of this meeting. How can I make sure that everything that I'm doing is helping this process move forward? Because here's the reality. If somebody calls you, or if you get somebody on the hook that wants to have a conversation about real estate, there is a reason why. And over a long enough time frame, they will make a decision. There's no condition that can't be met with time. Now they may outgrow their time frame, right? It's the Methuselah concept. If I give you enough time, we could all be millionaires. Some of us just run out of time. So some of our people will run out of time, but if we treat them as if they had infinite amount of time, we will more than likely continue to come back to them to help them understand how they can move forward. Okay? Hopefully all this makes sense. I know that this is a lot to really consume, and I know that it's a lot to put into practice, right? I tried to, and I think I've done as best a job as I can, take the idea of objections and condense it down as much as possible. But I do know that today is like drinking from the fire hose. It's a lot to understand, and it's a lot to take in, and then it's a lot to start putting into practice. So I would tell you to do just the one thing. practice those 3 moments, right? If those are going to be the 3 true objections that I'm going to get, like those are going to be the most common objections, put together at least 3 responses that are going to hit at the core of those 3 moments, so that now you have at least a defense mechanism for when that hits, that you can move the conversation forward. Because unfortunately, what most of the time what happens is somebody says, "Oh, I'm not ready right now," and then the conversation's over. I didn't know how to respond. I hesitated. They hung up. Or I hesitated. They said, right? So in my hesitation, I wasn't ready, right? It's mostly in that hesitation moment. So at least give yourself an opportunity to get behind the hesitation, so that then everything that you're doing is moving the conversation forward. We don't have a whole lot of time for our comments, but I do, if there's something right there that's just boiling up inside of you that you've got to be able to get out, I want to invite anybody right now. You can unmute yourself, add any questions, and or if you have a comment that's pertinent to what we covered, would love to hear from you. Otherwise, I'll make sure Crystal gets these presentations out to you and the document with the 40 objection handling. All right. I like it. Okay, guys. Well, y'all are awesome. I really thank you. Thanks for your patience. I think the Facebook thing has thrown our connectivity off a little bit, but that's okay. Y'all are awesome. If there's anything you guys need, let me go make sure connect into the Facebook page. I don't see any comments happening in there either. So if you're good, I'm good, and we're going to go ahead and end.